What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, February 14th, Valentine's Day. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We've got a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on here, a lot of breaking news we're going to get into. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and observations here. Now, again, it is Valentine's Day. And a rather interesting revelation in this article, there's a steady decline in the number of people celebrating Valentine's Day, but the amount of spending has increased constantly because, like so many of our holidays, it's being seized on as a marketing opportunity. And I saw a story on Fox News just yesterday about how the average woman would be spending $35 for her Valentine's Day gift, whereas the average man would be spending something like $330. So it's kind of a little biased. You know, there's no equality there. It's like the old saying, you know, man's best friend is a dog, but diamonds are a girl's best friend. And how that ever came on out here. And apparently this year the trend is yellow gold, and they're saying it could set a new Valentine's spending record. And of course, gold jewelry is very often exempt from seizures. And that's something rather interesting to think about as we get close to an economic upheaval, which might have the government order people to, you know, turn in their gold like Roosevelt did here. Okay, so let's get on over to the border wall debate. The latest word now is that Trump is going to sign the spending bill to get the government back into operation for the rest of the fiscal year, and he is going to declare a national emergency in order to get the difference between what Congress gave him for the border wall and what he wants. So that is the latest development. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said that Trump told him he intends to sign the spending bill and declare a national emergency in order to get the rest of the funding. I think it's the best course of action. The government gets back to work, and Trump gets his wall built, and I can just imagine how the Democrats are howling because they wanted to basically deny Trump his wall just to be able to say, we can't let him win. And we're already hearing that Democrats and others are going to be going into court. If he declares a national emergency, they're going to go to court and say, no, he can't do that, and just try and tangle it up in court for a very, very long time. Get as many of those illegal immigrants in here to vote Democrat as they possibly can. Even the National Butterfly Center is trying to get an injunction against the wall because apparently the wall is getting in the way of butterflies flying back and forth. Actually, I have a clue for you, National Butterfly Center. Butterflies can fly over the wall. And the kind of wall that we're talking about now is the one with the steel slats. The butterflies can fly between the steel slats. It's just all about lawfare and trying to jam this thing up. But a lot of people on the right are still wishing that Trump had held out to get Congress to fully fund the wall. Again, because of that chest thumping, who's going to win, who's going to lose, and politics is perception. So they're angry, and apparently the White House is trying to do some calm down here. And apparently they called Lou Dobbs and Sean Hannity, and just tried. We need the support because there are still concessions in the spending bill that would not have happened without that 5-week partial government shutdown. So we'll see how that is going to work. Now, of course, we have yet to see the declaration of a national emergency. And I'm tired of being tweeted what's going to happen. I want to see stuff happen now. It isn't real until it's steel. I hope I can use that for the southern border fence. But it's like the promises he made when he was campaigning. They sounded good. They didn't happen. Anyway, interestingly enough, the budget bill, and a lot of people are already complaining. They're saying it's just awful. Apparently, twice as much money was allocated for, quote, refugee assistance, end quote, than for the border wall itself. In other words, they're spending twice as much money to take care of these people sneaking into our country than to build the wall to keep them from sneaking into this country. So you just think about that. I mean, all this money for refugee assistance, and we're talking about, provides aid, buses, legal shields to the migrants. And again, where is the money for our homeless veterans? That's what I want to know. We have legal American citizens sleeping in tent cities right now. All right, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network, and we're going to take a call from Jim in Chicago. Jim, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. This proves that Donald Trump is not a deal maker. The deal that was on the table, and he could have signed it before the shutdown, was a much better deal than this particular deal.
Yes.
Now, as far as the national emergency, does that mean he's going to be taking money from FEMA, the Army, and other places?
Well, we already know that the Pentagon has informed Trump that they have some unallocated funds, because they got lots of money over there at the Pentagon, and that they could come up with that money. Then we have Ted Cruz's deal. Civil forfeiture applies in the case of El Chapo. It's not like he's going to be able to do anything with his wealth sitting in that little tiny room in that Supermax prison. So there's something like $14 billion in there. That's enough money to really start thinking about a truly solid fence reaching all the way from San Diego to the Rio Grande, and then buy a couple of crocodiles to put in the Rio Grande.
I normally don't agree with Ted Cruz, but as far as getting money from El Chapo, I agree with that 100%. But again, I'm just concerned that there's going to be so many lawsuits where Trump won't be able to do anything. That's my concern.
Well, it is a valid concern, but again, I think Ted Cruz makes a valid point. I think a lot of people are supporting, because after all, if we build that wall, we know that a big part of the drug smuggling operation is going to be slowed down, stopped, along with the illegal immigration. The two
right.
go.
Michael,
Sorry?
I was going to say, I'm going to let you go. I have something else to do. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Yeah, the people smuggling and the drug smuggling go together. Very often, these illegal immigrants, as they cross the border, they're carrying backpacks of illegal drugs. That fence is going to help deal with the illegal street drug problem in this country. Won't deal with the prescription opioid crisis, but that's a task for another time. Back to the phones here. James in South Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, you used to say that you didn't like the Electoral College. I haven't heard you mention it lately. Maybe you have. I just missed it. What is your position on the Electoral College today?
Well, I'm still having to think about the issue. I think I'm on the fence with it, mostly because the Electoral College is a system to prevent the most populous states from simply dominating every election, which would be like California, New York, Pennsylvania, and Texas. And everybody else, really, it doesn't matter which way they vote. So I do need to put a little bit more thought into it. But questions about the Electoral College are irrelevant until we get an honest, verifiable election system. And that is where I'm really upset with Donald Trump, because he came in, he campaigned talking about election fraud. And he came on in, he was going to have this Election Integrity Commission, and he set it all up. They went on out. They started running in, obviously, to resistance from the state election commissions who don't want their dirty little secrets aired. And then Trump just shut it down. Trump should have sent, the FBI with this election commission into these states and said, look, you give us these records. You don't have a right to refuse. This is a federal investigation. And he'll pay the price for it in 2020.
I agree, but with the electoral college, there are not but 100 electoral votes that are not directly aligned with population. That is less than 20% of the entire electoral college. And
Well,
to
that is an issue that I have to think about why we have electors that are not attached to state populations. Is it simply a blanket 2 electors per state?
Yes.
Okay.
It's 2 electors per state. It was set up like that, in my opinion, because the states were originally elected. I mean, the state legislatures originally elected the senators. That was changed in 1913.
Yeah.
But that's the way it was originally set up. And the small states were supposed to have a lot of power over and above, just the population, and it was meant so that the big states would not dominate the small states.
Well, sounds like a good idea.
They would make the,
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Well, I mean, you used to be opposed to it. A lot of people are opposed to it, but I mean, if they wanted to make it and do it constitutionally, they could give electoral votes to each individual representative district. And instead of the entire state of California, the state of Texas, wherever, they would break up the electoral votes according to the district in which they voted, and it would not be a winner take all. There are 2 states that do that now. I think it's Maine and Nebraska.
Yes.
And there are other things. I mean, and nobody remembers this, but in 1960, Senator Harry Byrd got 15 electoral votes. And that was because some of the, not for good reasons at the time, but I think Alabama and Mississippi somehow or other voted for a non-scheduled set of electors. In other words, the electors could vote any way they wanted to, and they chose to vote for Harry Byrd. There are other things that can be done, but this thing they're doing now with the Electoral College is they're getting individual states to agree to vote the way that the popular vote goes. Now, I'm not sure that's illegal or anything, because each end of the electors do have the right to vote the way they want to, as far as I know.
Well, here's where it gets to be a little bit tricky, because in theory, we the people are supposed to be electing the president, and it is possible for the Electoral College to reverse the will of the people. Remember, back in 2016, there was actually a campaign by the Hillary Clinton campaign to try and convince the electors to vote for her. So it is perfectly legal. Now, that mechanism was basically justified when it was set up by saying, in case there was a populist demagogue that was seen as a threat to the country, the electors could intervene and put somebody else. And I believe at one point in history, the Electoral College did hand the presidency to somebody who lost the popular vote. And I don't mean Donald Trump. I'm talking about...
Oh, it's happened 5 times.
Okay.
So it's not unusual, in American history at all. But I don't know what if you wish to have a republic as opposed to a constitutional republic, you would have to go and change the Constitution. I mean, again, it seems that the small states and I mean ways of life and local economies should be represented, as opposed to being stomped on by the big states. You'd make all the small states like backyard of the country. They would just put anything they wanted to in the low population states.
Well, I think the reason
needs to be some pushback over and above.
Let me step in here for a second. I think the reason that it wasn't really thought all the way through was when the Constitution was being written. Overall population density was very low. The people were spread out more or less uniformly across farming country. I mean, there were a few cities like Philadelphia, but not the giant population centers we see now. So I don't think the Founding Fathers anticipated the variance in population from state to state. I mean, California wasn't even part of the country back then. Neither was Texas. It was just, again, the original 13 states, and they were all pretty much about the same size, except for New York was a little bit larger, and so was Pennsylvania. But again, they didn't really have huge populations.
It's just something to think about. I mean, to have, I would be afraid of a direct popular vote for the presidency. And
well, again, all of this is moot until we know the voting system itself is accurate, honest, verifiable, and we don't have that. And until we have that, all these other discussions are rather pointless. So, James, thanks an awful lot. I'm going to let you go, and we're going to get on back here to the news. Okay, so the Angel families once again have stormed into House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office with calls to secure the U.S. southern border. Once again, they were turned away. Now, the Angel families are Americans whose loved ones have been killed by illegal aliens. And they basically flooded into the office with questions as to why their many requests for meetings with the Speaker go unanswered. And front office staff had little to offer in the way of an answer and wouldn't give an idea of when so much as an aide would be available to meet with them. Nancy doesn't want to talk with them. Nancy doesn't want the American public dealing with the fact that, yes, illegal immigrants are committing crimes, including murder. All right, well, we already talked about Ted Cruz here. We already talked about the National Butterfly Center. That really is silly here. All right. Yesterday we were talking about this sort of confrontation, if you will, between Representative Ilhan Omar and Elliott Abrams. And it was rather spectacular to watch, and you could see that Abrams was getting very, very upset. So she came on in and started her time saying that he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress in the Iran-Contra scandal and his subsequent pardon by George W. Bush. And Omar said, "I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful." And apparently at that point, Abrams started to get red. Now, this is all taking place during the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And then Omar went on to say, "Would you support an armed faction within Venezuela that engages in war crimes, crimes against humanity, or genocide if you believe they were serving U.S. interests as you did in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua?" So you don't mess with the Omar. She has her facts. And I think Abrams is going to go on doing what he's doing, but she did score some points on him. Apparently, William Barr now has enough votes to be confirmed as the next Attorney General, and I know it's kind of a mixed bag. The Democrats are, of course, concerned that he is going to try and limit the scope of Robert Mueller's investigation, which it was supposed to be under the special counsel law. Special counsels have a very narrow scope. They're not supposed to just go on fishing expeditions in all directions, which is what Robert Mueller did. So we'll see what's going to happen. We've just had this horrible track record recently of one crooked attorney general after another, after another, after another, after another. So we'll see what's going to happen on that one. Now, Andrew McCabe has a new book out. And in it is a bombshell revelation that the Department of Justice, apparently seriously, talked about recruiting Mike Pence to remove Trump from the presidency with the 25th Amendment. More about this when we get back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And if you would like to help out Republic Broadcasting, and trust me, they really do need the help. This equipment is getting old. And of course, these days, equipment isn't really manufactured to last all that long. They want you to come back and buy new ones over and over and over again, which is going to be a bit of a trick here because the music store that we use to get equipment from just closed. So I guess I'm back to ordering everything on eBay. Anyway, the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. And of course, you can also pledge to be a recurring subscriber. So we're talking about this revelation that Andrew McCabe put in his new book, that the Department of Justice reportedly held meetings discussing the possibility of having Mike Pence replace Trump as the president, justifying the de facto coup by invoking the 25th Amendment. Now, if you read the 25th Amendment, all it takes is enough people willing to sign statements saying they don't think the president is functioning, and he can be removed. And then the burden is on the president to prove that he's perfectly okay and able to return to work. So apparently the discussions occurred after James Comey's firing, and Rod Rosenstein was part of those discussions. And apparently last year, Rosenstein actually suggested removing Trump via the 25th Amendment, comments he later described as not serious. Come on, guys. Everybody's always talking about the 25th. I mean, there's nothing there. And by the way, Mike Pence was on Fox News earlier today, saying, I never heard anything about 25th Amendment from anybody. So I think, and let's face it, Donald Trump is going to have to look at this and he's going to have to say, all right, something needs to be done. Now, McCabe, again, pushing his new book, is going to be on 60 Minutes this Sunday. And apparently, he's saying that he was the one who ordered the obstruction of justice probe of President Trump. And that the reason that he did it is that he wanted the inquiries to be documented and underway so they'd be difficult to quash without scrutiny. Basically said, I didn't want them to close or vanish in the night without a trace. It was just harassment. Anyway, Trump, meanwhile, has chimed in on Twitter, and he slammed McCabe for giving Hillary Clinton a pass on all of her corruption, which McCabe did. And remember, McCabe has admitted to lying to the Department of Justice's Inspector General. So, anyway. Okay. Talking about the election system here. It is an embarrassment. It is an embarrassment. Here are the top 20 states with more voters than actual citizens. Number 1 is California, that has 1,736,556 more registered voters than actual people. Second place is Michigan with roughly 250,000. Third place is Georgia, roughly 200,000. Same with North Carolina, Indiana. Washington State, about 170,000. Illinois, 116,000. Florida, 100,000. Virginia, 90,000. Kentucky, 80,000. Mississippi, 43,000. Iowa, 31,000. Texas, 30,000. Maine, 30,000. Missouri, 27,000. New Jersey, 26,000. Maryland, 25,000. Connecticut, 17,000. Alabama, 15,000. These are all active voter registrations, and especially look out in California, 1.7 million. Something has to be done about this. Our election system is a joke, and it is being used and exploited to basically steal elections at pretty much every level of our government to keep a certain favored group in power perpetually. That's why they were so upset when Trump won in 2016. He wasn't supposed to. Hillary was preordained to be the first female U.S. president. But the American people just never liked her. They didn't like her policies. And they voted against Hillary so overwhelmingly that they overwhelmed the election fraud. That's what it comes down to. There was massive election fraud against Donald Trump, but you can't reverse a landslide, or it becomes really obvious what you're doing. Okay, now, as you know, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is out there with her Green New Deal and doesn't seem to realize or accept that a lot of people are finding some serious fault with it. Now, we have to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're talking now about the Green New Deal. And Macon McArdle basically came on out with this excoriating articles and basically says, you know, we're nuts isn't a great pitch for a Green New Deal. So he whipped out his calculator and he basically estimated that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez plan would require the entire population of the United States, or at least those who aren't unwilling to work, to drop whatever they're doing and start training to become insulation installers, HVAC technicians, electricians, automotive engineers, or demolition experts. I'd go the latter one. But even a quarter of that effort doesn't really seem very practical. And that was my argument when it first came on out. And I looked at it and I said, it can't be made to work. The numbers just aren't there. It sounds good. It panders to the ultra-liberal left. You know, it plays into, you know, the climate gate, global warming, we're going to have more plants and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And it all sounded really good, except that there was no provision in there how to actually get it done. And that tends to be a failure with a lot of plans that come out of Washington, D.C. They're basically written to sound good on the radio or look good on TV, and the implementation just isn't there. And I guess the politicians figure, well, we'll just hire some consulting firm and they'll figure out how it's going to work. But I think it would be wise to be able to look at some of these proposals and just at a glance, and again, whip out the calculator and just see, is this in any way close to being realistic? And in the case of the Green New Deal, for much of it, the answer is definitely no. So part of what Alexandria wanted was, of course, a network of bullet trains. So that debacle out in California has got to be a major setback for her. Apparently, Democratic Senator Bob Menendez got very rude with a conservative reporter who wanted to ask him some questions about the Green New Deal. The reporter is Henry Rogers of Daily Caller. And Rogers just wanted to go up and talk about well, things like the scandals in Virginia, the late-term abortion bills, and Menendez was waiting for a train, and Rogers asked him for his thoughts on the Green New Deal, and he basically, Menendez said, I won't answer questions to the Daily Caller, period. You're trash. Anyway, story coming on out from Investment Watch blog. Apparently, labor unions are now starting to pull away from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So she's starting to lose a lot of her support base. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Joe in Tennessee. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I have a few things on my mind, but the first one is that Congressman Omar and what she was doing with Abrams. Now, I don't like Abrams, and I thought he really is a funny-looking guy. He looks like a Muppet, you know, I mean, a caricature. Or whatever, however you say, caricature. Yeah. But anyway, I don't like when people like congressional committees are questioning somebody and they pull the old yes or no. You know, yes or no. It's just
yes.
Give the guy a chance, no matter who he is. You sit there and you tell his whole life story, and then is that true? Yes or no? I mean, you let the guy, you know, that bothers me. It's kind of like a bullying tactic. So
that's exactly what it is.
You know, so she's sitting there running him down, and you know he deserves to be run down. But at the same time, you know, there might be stuff that we've known about him that's not true, and he should have an opportunity to give a response instead of yes or no. So she shows like she's kind of clued in on what's going on. But at the same time, she's a bully at heart. That's what it showed me.
Well, actually, they all are. They all are. And in fact, there was a video montage that was up on whatreallyhappened.com. I think it was just yesterday, basically showing how all of these committees, they use the same thing. It's sort of become an automatic thing to just jam somebody into a yes or no answer and not give them room to muddy the waters, so to speak. But I think the reason that Abrams got so upset is because in Washington, D.C., there's kind of this understanding that you don't talk about the bad things that were done in the past. And Omar broke that rule.
Well, he definitely looked uncomfortable, like he wasn't expecting that line of questioning. Yeah. I totally agree with you. But once again, she would have done a lot better if she would have said, how do you respond to this? And, that would have been fine, because most people would have seen that his answer was probably a lot of baloney, because you can tell that too. People are pretty good at judging, liars and the truth. But I just didn't like her bullying tactic. I don't think it really gets them anything. I see the Democrats were doing that a lot with what's his name, Whitaker.
Yes.
And it just doesn't help. It doesn't make them look good. It doesn't help in pursuit of the truth. And I just don't. I think that they're coming across as bullies. That's not going to help trying to get rid of Trump, because they're going to look like bullies, and Trump's going to play that angle. Like, look, oh, poor me. Look what they're the presidential harassment squad, and that's what they ended up looking like. So I don't think they're doing themselves any favors. The other thing I wanted to bring up was Amazon. Imagine buying property in Long Island City, expecting you're going to make all this money, and then Amazon just pulled the plug on the deal in New York. A lot of realtors are really going to be jumping off buildings today.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of happy about it on several levels. One, with Cuomo and the celebration of the abortion bill, the infanticide bill, I should call it. I'm glad that New York, this happened in New York. And it's also Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's district, Long Island City. And since she's a socialist, let people understand that electing socialists, this is the kind of thing that happens to you. So it's a win-win on a lot of different levels. I wish Amazon would come here to Tennessee. We could use it. Would really be a punch in the nose to New York. So that was one of the other things I wanted to comment on. And then this whole thing with the deep state, it's unbelievable that this guy McCabe isn't in prison right now. I think they should arrest Pence. I think they need a night with black helicopters, and they need to arrest all these deep state people that were involved in this attempted coup of the President of the United States. I've been saying this since day one, when Brennan was on TV running down the president who was just elected, that how are they allowing these kind of people, heads of the CIA, FBI, to be orchestrating an attempted coup? We're not a third world country. This really needs to be, it cannot just lie. It has to be totally investigated. These people have to be put in prison, every single one of them. And that's that.
No, I'm in agreement with you on that, but the other issue is going to be Trump has got to be seen to respond to this, and I don't mean just with more tweets. I mean, that was an attempt at a coup d'etat. It was a challenge.
Oh, no, and if he's got to start firing the head of the FBI, Wray, that's there now, who's not doing anything. There might be a lot of you always hear this Q and all these other people talking about secret investigations and secret indictments.
Yeah.
Well, at the same time, if that's not the case, then this is such a sham and an embarrassment, and he really needs to do something immediately. These people need to be in prison. This guy's on 60 Minutes. He just wrote a book.
Yes.
What's it? How I Attempted to Overthrow the President? Is that the title of it? Because that's what
I don't know the title, but that would certainly be an appropriate one.
And I mean, how do you do that and get away with it in this country? I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, this is, but it's not unbelievable. I mean, I've been aware of this, but to have him admit it on CBS and that's it, oh, okay.
Well, they didn't get away with it because the coup d'etat did not happen. But still, the idea that they were thinking about it, like I said, Trump has to respond to this very, very strongly. Anyway, Joe, we're going to let you go.
Thank you.
And we're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Elliot Abrams might look like a Muppet, but he can, disappear you and your family, and there's nothing can do about hurting him. This guy is a very dangerous man.
Yes.
He's part of that deep state. And to your previous caller, you can arrest all these people, like Hillary and stuff. This is only one layer of an onion. There's multiple layers involved.
Yes.
So you know what I mean? So if you can get one layer of it, there's another layer to replace them, and another layer, and another layer. So I mean,
I think I think the Clintons are definitely a layer that is very close to the center. I mean, they're not street dealers. They're not small play. You know, they're major power, and that's why the entire federal government just turned a blind eye to all the corruption. The Clinton Foundation, you know, the way the Clinton Foundation basically shortchanged those poor people of Haiti following the quake is why they're having these massive riots right now. The Clinton Foundation raised something like a huge amount of money for Haiti, and it didn't get down there. And so now they're having massive riots. And then you have the Uranium One deal that nobody seems to want to look at. So that tells me right there, the Clintons are very close to the core of the rot, the deep state, whatever you want to call it.
And I don't think we can ever get rid. I don't think we'll ever get rid of this. I mean, Mike, you've been saying it for years, and we all know there's like a deep state, but it's really out in the open. Like, you can see it now. Like, that's one thing Trump actually has brought out, this whole deep state oligarch, you know, in this country, but it also is connected to Britain with the Skripals, and it's all linked together, man. You know, the Skripals, which is linked to Christopher Steele of the Dirty Dossier. I mean, if you connect the dots, it's basically you can figure out what's going on. You know, I mean,
yes, you
it's
can.
not hard.
Well, do you remember
in France? You know,
remember this coffee mug we sell over at our What Really Happened store? It says on there, the fastest way to bring down a dictator is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it. And that is where we are right now. People can see the machinations of the deep state, and they don't like what they're looking at.
Hey, what do you make of Mike Pompeo? He's like talking like when he was in, was it Belfast?
Yes.
I think. No, he was in, well, he was saying like, they talked about like alternative, the EU's making alternative currencies, you know, like, see right there, you know, they're scared of that alternative currency. They're scared of losing the petrodollar as the world's reserve. Even a little, you know, if once the Chinese yuan,
you're confusing your terms, Dustin. Okay, the dollar is the reserve currency. The petrodollar is basically talking about linking the dollar to the oil trade, so that oil is bought and sold globally only for the dollar, which used to be the case, but no more.
But do you think they're scared now because of him bringing that up with China? That's a threat.
Oh, he's said a lot of things when he's been on that tour, and you know, now we're hearing even worse things coming out of the Warsaw Mideast Summit. Not just from him, but from Netanyahu, and we're going to get there in a little bit.
Okay, that was right. That was Warsaw. Sorry about that. All right, have a good show, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open again. And getting on back to the news here, and getting to the war zones here. Not too long ago, Venezuelan authorities intercepted a smuggled shipment of weapons that was flown into Caracas from Miami. The airplane has now been traced back to its owner, an air freight company that is also linked to the CIA black site renditions, you know, grabbing these people and flying them off to torture centers. So already we're seeing CIA involvement on this thing. So last Tuesday, Venezuelan authorities announced that 19 rifles, 118 ammo magazines, 90 radios, 6 iPhones had been smuggled into the country via a U.S. plane that originated in Miami. And Venezuela is blocking what is described as humanitarian aid coming into his country because of his concern that it's actually weapons to arm insurgent groups that are also working for the CIA. It's the Syria ploy all over again. That's what's going on. That's how the U.S. is planning on doing it. It's not going to be a full frontal invasion from Colombia. All righty. Over in Syria, the U.S. has set up a new base on the border with Iraq. They're now out there saying, oh, the ISIS threat is growing again. That's why we have to stay here. And Syria and Russia, of course, saying, no, ISIS is pretty much gone, and it's time for you to go too. But at this point, it's very obvious the United States has no plans to leave. They're going to occupy Syria, occupy somebody else's country. They don't have the permission of the Syrian government to be there. They were never invited to be there. They just walked on in and said, you know, we're exceptional, Stan, and here we are. Now, we mentioned this yesterday, and I want to go into it again. Remember that gas attack in Douma? And they said, oh, it's sarin, and they had this video showing all these people at the hospital, and they were being treated, and a lot of people said this looks fake, because if these were victims of sarin, and these medical personnel who were not wearing any protective gear, they would have gotten sick as well. Well, it turns out Western fake news, including BBC, are finally admitting that that video was staged. It was theater. It was a cinema, is what they did. Now, there's still up in the air as to whether there really was an attack or not. I remember back when it happened, the Syrian doctors were saying that there had been a conventional bombing of a building which had resulted in dust inhalation for a lot of people, and that's what they were really trying to treat. There's another story out there saying that there was no sarin, but there may have been chlorine gas. But here's the bottom line. That video that was all over the corporate media was staged. It was produced. It was fake news. It didn't really happen. They just put out the props. They got people into costumes. They dumped water all over kids. That was it. It was just manufactured right there. And you need to keep that in mind when you're looking at other videos, and for that matter, photos. Because now that we're on to them, corporate media is working to get better and better with these new tools. All right, we got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about the arming up, the war zones, the tension, the bad rhetoric here. And apparently, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo yesterday went to the Polish town of Orzysz. I hope I pronounced that correct. Orzysz, to witness NATO live fire exercises, in an unmistakable sign that the United States has its eye on Russia, because the Russian border was little more than an hour away. So this is called sending a message. So anyway, now, story coming on out of Sputnik News. The commander of the U.S. agency tasked with detecting strategic attacks on American soil, NORAD, called on Canada and the United States to stop the discussions and begin deploying new systems to counter the Russian military threat. Ooh, money, 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 money. We're going to get money coming on in here. So General Terence O'Shaughnessy, the U.S. commander of NORAD, says the United States and Canada must urgently upgrade their missile defenses in the face of increased Russian military activity. Actually, it's the United States that is increasing their military activity all over the world. We've got military forces in 39% of the world's countries, not counting Venezuela. And it looks like we're already covertly inside there. So the general cited Russia's renewed fighter jet patrols in the Arctic after 30 years of inactivity. But the United States is back up in the Arctic after 30 years of inactivity. Regular flights of Russian strategic bombers to the boundaries of U.S. and Canadian airspace, and deployment of cruise missiles in northern regions as grounds for the upgrade. Basically what he's saying is, we got to have more money. You're all going to have to make do with less so we can have lots more weapons. That's really what they're saying. They're replaying the Cold War. And the Cold War was this huge scam in the 1950s and the 1960s where they would wave the Soviet Union. They're coming to get you. They're going to make you accept socialized medicine and do all kinds of other and basically soaked the American people for money to give to the weapons manufacturers. And we built up these huge arsenals of weapons, which, fortunately for the most part, were never used. And you might want to go into Google Earth rather, out to Arizona to what's called the Boneyard. And it is acre after acre after acre after acre of these military planes that are just corroding in the desert sun. And that is the real crime of military spending. You don't really get a return for it. That money, all the wealth that went into building all of those aircraft, it dead-ended. That's it. It's not coming back. So, all right, we're coming up here on the top of the hour, and when we come on back, we'll be in hour number 2 and talking about a lot more that's going on in the world. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to go to the phones to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I just thought I'd tell you, I was listening, every once in a while I still turn on some of these mainstream talk shows, corporate talk shows, just for a little while, just to see what they're saying about the major stuff. And I figured they would be talking about that lady from, what's her name with the, with the headdress on? Omar something.
Ilhan Omar.
Ilhan, yeah. And evidently she really gave, and, no matter what else I might think of her, one way or the other, I really like the way she gave it to that war criminal, with that murderous war criminal there, Elliot Abrams.
Yes.
And sure enough, Len Beck, who is to me one of the biggest, maybe the biggest phonies around of any of the left, right, center, or anything else, was putting her down and praising this war criminal, Abrams. And he's always a shill for the Zionist neocon types.
Yes.
Anyway. A lot of people think he's Operation Mockingbird. I don't know if he is or isn't. It wouldn't surprise me. He himself became a multi-millionaire in not that long of a time. So, but anyway, he was really putting her down and praising Abrams, really, and saying it's wrong. He didn't like the idea that evidently she called him a murderer or something. And then I turned on, just to see, since I have XM, I was in my vehicle, and I turned on David Webb, who's got a show on XM there, a talk show host. I don't know if you know who the guy is. He's he's another neocon stooge, and he was also putting her down. I mean, these people think they got, they call themselves conservative. They're not really conservative.
No, they're not.
Neocons. Tell people the neocon is really a neo-Trotskyite. What Trotsky wanted to do is basically push his form of communism around the world. Stalin was more of a Russian nationalist, really, and he stopped it. Matter of fact, he literally gave him the axe, in Mexico City. So, I mean, this is what these people are. And they don't understand. A lot of people say, well, how can you call a conservative a so-called conservative communist? Because what they are is they're trying to Trotsky pushed revolution. He wanted to push it all over the world, and he was sponsored by some of the worst globalist Rothschild bankers like Jacob Schiff. And he was funded by Schiff. And as a matter of fact, when he lived in New York City, Schiff put him up, gave him living expenses and everything else, and then helped ship him over to Russia together with Lenin, basically pushed that revolution. He was one of the most vicious. Trotsky probably was the most vicious of the Bolsheviks.
Yes,
and he's loved by a lot of these neocons. Like perfect example is Bill Kristol-Slavic, who was a Trotskyite, and I believe Kristol himself is still a Trotskyite, and I believe people like Abrams are Trotskyites. They want to push revolution using the U.S. Army. Trotsky wanted to use the Red Army to do it, but he was stopped. And like I said, Stalin took over. Stalin didn't want any of this stuff. Stalin wanted to be left alone, basically. He didn't even want war with Germany, in the beginning. And, he managed to get rid of Trotsky. And finally, like I said, he axed him, literally.
Yes.
So this is basically what it is. This is what this is all about. This is why they hate Russia so much too, a lot of these neocons, because they know they still hold a grudge that their beloved Trotsky was kicked out of power, that he wasn't able to take over there. That's one of their things. So that's about, I don't know, that's about all I got to say. I just wonder what you got to say about that.
Well,
my
first response is, I mean, we're talking about events that happened so long ago, and I'm having a hard time thinking that people here in the 21st century are really going to let something that happened that long ago be the dominant factor in trying to figure out what to do in the here and now. There may be some lingering resentments in the back of their mind, and they say, gee, it would be nice to get our revenge on Russia. But I think the motives for basically going after Russia, and it looks more like containment than anything else. I don't think anybody's really thinking about trying to invade Russia. But the goal is containment of both Russia and China to leave the rest of the earth in the U.S. economic sphere of influence. Okay? Did we lose Mark? Okay. Okay, Mark dropped. All right, here we go. Welcome to the world of live radio. All right, getting on back to Ilhan Omar. Interestingly enough, AIPAC, apparently not appreciating the irony of it, has run a new ad campaign soliciting donations that is using Omar's comments and cautions about the problematic role of lobbyists in U.S. politics to basically say, give us more money, so that we can further influence the political process on Capitol Hill. Now, as you know, our members of Congress, the finest politicians money can buy, are out there trying to basically pull away from all this. And the latest spin coming on out is from the New York Times' David Leonhardt, who says Omar's tweet is anti-Semitic because, yes, members of Congress get lots of money from AIPAC, and yes, members of Congress are always doing things for Israel, but, not all the support for Israel is paid for by money. Some of it is actual sincere, and because of that tiny bit of support for Israel that is sincerely felt by the members of Congress, that's what makes Omar's tweets anti-Semitic. So that's their latest spin. All right, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're going to go back to the phones to Joe in California. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Mike, one of your past callers, it's a shame he's really sorely missed, is that John from Barbados. I would have loved to have heard what he had to say about. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he passed away. He's sorely missed, especially now. I'd love to have heard his take on what's going on in Venezuela.
Yes,
he would with his contacts in the world of espionage. Mike, I wanted to ask you about something about Russia, but quickly, what do you make of what Salvini of Italy said about basically ending private central banking?
Well, obviously, I agree with that, and it's.
Absolutely
being seen as a major threat by the ECB. But what he's talking about right now is Italy still has its own central bank that is subservient to the ECB. But Salvini is saying, time for a state bank. The gold in that central bank belongs to the people of Italy. It doesn't belong to the bank. So I think he's getting ready to do something really dramatic when the recession settles in, which looks to be imminent. And right now, for all intents and purposes, Salvini is running the place. I know he's the deputy, but he just seems to be in charge.
Yeah, but that subject, even among people who have been described as reformers, that subject is taboo. Not even people who are portrayed as reformers have even broached the subject of the private central banks. Look at Jeremy Corbyn in the UK. Richie Allen's always attacking him for ignoring that subject. So Salvini, I have to say, he might be the real deal.
Well, in Great Britain, they had a private central bank but it got nationalized after the Bretton Woods Agreement, and the Bank of England was no longer making profit with the British pound being the global reserve currency. And so at some point, Great Britain actually nationalized it. So Great Britain technically does not have a private central bank. So that may be why,
Okay.
you know.
Mike, last question on Russia. I had heard Robert David Steele say that the Russians are capable of disabling an entire U.S. battle carrier group. And you recall what happened in the Black Sea, where only one Russian fighter jet disabled that USS Cook destroyer. He says that obviously it would be crazy to go to war with Russia because they could, I guess, through electronic warfare, disable an entire carrier group.
Yeah, they definitely have shot ahead of us in electronic warfare and in a lot of other areas as well. And that's because Russia, and for that matter China, their equivalent of the military-industrial complex is all about making the weapons. They want to make very effective, cost-effective, inexpensive weapons that do the job. Here in the United States, it's just part of a money-making scam, and that's why we have all these really hideously expensive. Sorry?
It's junk what they produce. What they produce in the U.S. I mean,
it is, and it's very expensive junk.
Right, Russia's total defense budget. You know what we hear publicly is pronounced publicly is about $50 billion. So I haven't heard what China's defense budget is, but I know Russia apparently their total defense budget is $50 billion, which is less than less than 1/10 of what we spend here in the U.S.
Yeah, it is. But remember, much of the Pentagon budget is actually going to support these 700 plus military bases all over the world, and that's really the lion's share of the money going in. So in terms of money available for weapons development, not as much, although obviously they came up with that $1 trillion to develop the F-35.
Sure helps these congressmen and senators' stock portfolios as well, because I'm sure all of them or most of them are invested in these companies. I have no doubt. Talk about a conflict of interest.
I absolutely agree, but there's also another factor, and that is that when these big weapons programs get put into get voted for approval, they get broken up, and contracts are basically put into the states or districts of those members of Congress who supported the project. Now, that makes for jobs, and it makes for good politics for the politician. It actually is probably one of the reasons why so much of our weapons are junk, because you're talking about trying to build all the parts for something, literally across the country, and then bring it together in one place and hope it's all going to fit together properly.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. All right. Over in Israel, in Hebron, it looks like something really bad is about to crank up in Hebron. But apparently a group of illegal Israel colonists invaded a Palestinian home in the old city of Hebron in the southern part of the occupied West Bank and threatened to kill the entire family. The homeowner, Ahmad Egnabi, said the colonists demanded him to leave his property so that they could illegally occupy and annex it, and they threatened to kill him and his entire family if he does not leave. So dozens of Palestinians, including members of the Fatah movement in the Old City and nonviolent activists against the annexation wall and colonies, rushed to the property and vowed to do whatever it would take to protect the family in their home. And apparently Israeli colonists also attacked Palestinians in the Shuhada Street in Hebron before the soldiers rushed to the area, and they removed local nonviolent activists who were trying to document the invasion and declared it a closed zone to all Palestinians. Yeah, I think Israel's getting ready to put a major move on Hebron itself. All right, now Mike Pence is demanding that Europe withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal, and he basically is lashing out at the EU's effort to evade Washington's sanctions on Tehran. described Iran as a vile regime and stopped trying to break up the sanctions here. Now, he was at that security conference in Warsaw, Poland. Pence chastised Europe for leading an effort to create mechanisms to break up our sanctions against Iran and complained that European countries had not been cooperative since the Trump administration withdrew from the Iran deal last year. Well, he's got a valid point there, but the reason they're not being cooperative is they didn't agree with the decision. And while they generally are under the influence of the United States, it's not like they want to publicly appear to be vassal states. So Pence is out there saying that unless the EU pulls out of the Iran deal and goes back to allowing the sanctions, that it will create still more distance between Europe and the United States. And Mike, I got to let you know, there's already a lot of distance between Europe and the United States, and it is increasing. And to up the ante and talk about if at first you don't succeed, lie again, Mike Pence came out with a huge load of USDA choice bovine excrement. He's claiming Iran is plotting a new Holocaust that would erase Israel from the map. And just the lies get bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, Iran's history is not like that. First of all, Iran had nothing to do with what we're told is the original Holocaust. That was another country which is no longer around. Iran has not initiated a war of conquest against another country in over 200 years. That is the historical truth. And so, and again, back when Ahmadinejad was, when they tried that last overthrow of Iran, they were saying it back then. Oh yes, Iran wants a new Holocaust. They want to kill all the Jews in the world. That's what we have to go after them. It's preemptive. We have to save the Jews of the world by killing all the Iranians. And apparently, Pompeo told reporters that confronting Iran is a necessary step for any nation that wants to achieve peace and stability in the Middle East. Now, I have a problem with that, because right now it is the United States that is preventing peace and stability in the Middle East, along, of course, with Israel. But it's almost implying that there's a threat that if Europe and the Middle Eastern nations don't all cooperate and smash up Iran, that there will be a regional war that involves all of them. So that may be the implied threat. Now, over in Sochi, along the Black Sea, Russia, Turkey, and Iran are trying to discuss ways of ending Syria's 8-year-long war. And it's kind of weird to see this juxtaposition of Russia, Turkey, and Iran talking peace while Mike Pence and everybody else, especially Netanyahu, are over in Warsaw banging the war drums just as hard as they can. Okay. So the big problem, of course, is going to be that the U.S. clearly does not intend to leave Syria. Now, Netanyahu startled Iranians and even the White House yesterday when he came out with this strident call for Israeli Arab action against the government of Tehran that was translated by his office as urging war with Iran. He was speaking in Hebrew, and his office said, yeah, it's war with Iran. Then they tried to soften it, saying that the translation was botched and it's now struggle with Iran. But Netanyahu speaks very good English, and I think he knows what it was he was trying to say. But that's clearly what's going on. Israel got the United States to smash up Israel's regional rival Iraq, and now it's time for the United States to smash up Israel's regional rival Iran. That's what's going on here. All I can say is, here's your rifle, Bibi. Okay, now, for some reason right now, they're making a big deal out of this. There is this U.S. Air Force officer, Monica Witt, who's defected to Iran and apparently shared information that could cause serious damage to America's national security. Apparently she worked in counterintelligence. Now, this actually happened back in 2013, but apparently the indictment is just now being unsealed, and they're making a really, really big deal about this. So I don't know what the propaganda purpose is going to be, but we'll find out. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, interestingly enough, getting on back to this Warsaw gathering, interestingly enough, most European powers' participation was limited. And it shows Brussels is very angry over the U.S. stance on Iran. And that probably is explaining why Mike Pence went a little over the top, you know, issuing demands. You will pull out of the Iran deal. You will, help us strangle Iran. I would take it that Pence is getting a clear signal that Europe is not on board with all of this, that there really is no coalition. Okay, getting on back to our wonderful military and their expensive toys. Apparently, a U.S. Navy aircraft used to maintain strategic communication in the event of a nuclear attack was disabled when its tail clipped the door of the hangar while being towed out. Now, if you've seen hangar doors for aircraft, there's always a little secondary door right in the middle that goes up higher. And that's where the vertical stabilizer is supposed to go. But apparently the crew were towing this E-6B Mercury aircraft out of its parking spot at Tinker Air Force Base. They missed it by a wide mile, and the repairs are going to be millions. So there's a little bit of an oopsie here. Apparently, a lot of former MSNBC personnel, if you will, journalists, are starting to speak out about the shadiness that went on behind the scenes at their pro-war, anti-progressive networks. Apparently, executives dictate what they cover, and anybody who doesn't go along with it is pushed out. Fired anti-war host Phil Donahue was saying that MSNBC is terrified of anti-war voices. So, all right, let's talk about the economic news here, and the economic news is not looking all that great. Nearly 1/3 of Americans have more credit card debt than savings, and trust me, the interest on that credit card debt greatly exceeds the interest on your savings account. You can't run a nation perpetually on debt, and yet that's exactly what private central banking tries to do. The Kremlin is angry with the latest U.S. sanctions, calling it the bill from heck, and says that it's borderline racketeering. It's unfair competition. Now, the bill was sponsored by Senator Lindsey Graham and Bob Menendez, and they're claiming it is based on precise, pragmatic, and aggressive trade policy, which has nothing to do with international trading rules. That's coming from Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov. He says it's borderline racketeering. It's economic warfare is really what it is. Okay. Meanwhile, Russia's financial minister Anton Sulanov is saying that this latest sanctions deal may not have been thought all the way through. And there are going to be new sanctions against Russia's banking and energy sector, as well against Russia's sovereign debt. And Russia is ready to respond to the new sanctions. And according to the finance minister, if you're talking about debt, I've repeatedly said that in the first place, indeed, we have seen a reverse interest in our debt from foreign investors. This will hit foreigners first. These U.S. sanctions on Russia's sovereign debt are going to hit foreigners first. Something to see there. And I think another indicator that the European Union is not happy with the United States and is ready to just sort of split away from them is that the EU is now seeking to promote the euro in global energy trade. In other words, they want a petro-euro to displace the petrodollar. So Christian Roos, the EU has launched an effort to increase the role of its single currency in international energy transactions, with a particular focus on buying and selling oil and natural gas in euro-denominated transactions. So that's an attack on the petrodollar. Interestingly enough, and I have to tell you, I'm not excited about this, but apparently 2 pension plans in Fairfax County, Virginia are anchor investors in a new $40 million venture capital fund that is investing in cryptos. And it's basically, it's pension funds. Now, I don't know how they're able to do this, because I can't imagine anybody rating cryptocurrencies AAA, which you have to be before you can be purchased by pension plans. That's what happened back in 2008. But given the volatility of the cryptos, I don't know if that's really a good idea. I think somebody is thinking they're going to get rich quick, or they're going to get all the cryptos and then vanish the way that other guy did. And they still are wondering if he's really dead or not. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to take a phone call from Jim in New York. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. How are you? I'm starting to think this whole talk of a wall, it's just a campaign gimmick. It's theater. It's a diversion. I mean, the president, he had 2 years of Republicans controlling it, and they allocated $80 billion more for the military. They couldn't get $8 billion for a wall, and then he waits until the Democrats take over the House. I think I'm sorry, I think it's just a gimmick. I don't think anyone's serious about this wall. And it's just a camp. Go ahead.
Well, the problem here is that we Americans living in the streets of America can see with our own eyes that unfettered immigration is bad for our country. It's bad for our economy. It's bad for our quality of life. It's bad for our health. Something has to be done. And we count on the government to basically take care of and protect this nation and our people, not just treat the place like it's a drive-through restaurant, with freebies on the menu. And if Trump really has dropped the ball on this, I'm more than disappointed. I'm concerned that the United States, as I knew it when I was younger, is rapidly vanishing. And we're seeing places like California that used to be very beautiful. They're in serious trouble with trash and feces in the street. And just all kinds of problems. When you invite the third world into your nation, you're going to get third world problems, and that's exactly what's going on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm for the wall, but I don't know if Trump is serious about it, because like I said, he had 2 years of Republicans and $80 billion for the military, and they can't get $8 billion for the wall. I mean, I don't think they're serious about it. I think it's...
Well, the budget deal actually has twice as much in it to take care of the illegal immigrants than to build that wall. And, I mean, it's bad economics because the illegals represent a major burden on our economy. There are no jobs for them to have. Most of them are on welfare or other assistance. And it really doesn't make any sense at all. And the only argument the open border people have is that these people have some kind of a natural right to come here. Well, yeah, but they have to go through the immigration process. There's a legal immigration process. No country on earth has ever just opened up its borders and said to everybody, come on in.
Yes. Yeah. The president's been a big disappointment. The only good thing about Trump, I'll give him credit, is that he hasn't started any new wars.
What do you think is going on in Venezuela?
Yeah, well, I don't think we'll invade Venezuela.
No,
I
we're going
still
we're going to use the same approach we did in Syria. We're going to smuggle a bunch of weapons in and a bunch of money, and we're going to basically put together some mercenary groups pretending to be freedom fighters, and they're going to work as proxies to basically take out Maduro.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we're going to try to do what we did in Syria.
Even though what we did in Syria ultimately did not work.
No, and I hope it doesn't work in Venezuela. I mean, the people, they voted. Why can't they just wait 5 years for Maduro to be up for election again, right?
Well, that's a really interesting question, but again, there was that article that came out the other day that Trump has been talking about invading Venezuela for almost a year now. For some reason, he thinks it's a good idea, and it kind of shocked his staff and advisors. But for some reason, Trump just came up with this, and it's a bit of a shock because I didn't think he was that much of a warmonger, but apparently he is.
Oh boy. Well, hopefully not. I mean, we've already have the whole Middle East hating us. I don't think we would want South America.
Well, most of South America hates us anyway, and that goes back decades to these U.S.-backed coup d'etats in countries like Chile and Nicaragua and all of those. I mean, the United States government's behavior in South America is the reason the South Americans hate us.
Yeah. Oh, another thing. Another instance of the broken clock being right twice a day.
Yeah.
Is Congresswoman Omar, the
yes.
Congresswoman, who's talking about Israel. I mean, that takes a lot of courage. I give her credit.
Yep.
And, you would never see a conservative Republican or even most Democrats dare say something like that. So again, it's funny how the loony left wing, once in a while, they say something like I was calling last week about Cortez. Unlimited wars she was talking about. So I have to give credit where credit's due. So
well, yeah, but I mean, they're really attacking her. She's become a target. In fact, I'm looking at this article where they're trying to claim that the only reason Omar went after Elliot Abrams as hard as she did is because he's Jewish. That's the spin. That's
they
the spin.
always pull that stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy talk. In New York, I know lots of, and your average working person, Jewish person, they're clueless. They're just like anyone else. They watch Fox, they watch CNN. They have no idea what's going on. They're clueless, like a lot of Americans.
Okay, well, listen, Jim, we're going to let you go. The phone lines are loading up here. Thank you very much for the call, and we're going to switch to Art off the grid. Aloha, Art. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, kind of want to run something by you here, and I know I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this, but I'm always looking to try to refine a new argument to defeat the liberals. And now that we see socialists and Muslims in the so-called Democrat Party in Congress, here's how I look at it. I got into an argument with somebody here about a week ago, and that's what got me started on trying to refine this argument. I do not recognize, for those of you who vote Democrat as far as socialists and Muslims go, I do not recognize you as having constitutionally protected, not constitutional rights, but constitutionally protected rights under the Bill of Rights, because one, the very concept of socialism itself is an affront to inherent God-given rights, and the very concept of Islam in and of itself is a total affront to individual unalienable rights. So how can anyone call themselves an American, vote for a socialist or a Muslim, and then still expect that they have some kind of constitutionally protected rights? I just don't understand it.
Well, it's very simple. We have a principle in this country called the separation of church and state, and it doesn't matter which church that is. Representative Omar, when she's in that congressional building, she is there to serve the civil government of this country. And, you know, what her religious practices are in her private life, is her business. But we're not supposed to conflate the two. In fact, Andrew Cuomo made a point of calling that out there when he was being criticized for that abortion law in New York. And he says, I know it shocks a lot of people. It shocks me. You know, I'm a Catholic. I used to be an altar boy. But this is what, you know, the legislative mechanism is produced. And by the way, I found out there are already 29 other states that have similar late-term abortion laws. So Planned Parenthood's been working at that for a while. Anyway, Art, we're going to let you go and switch over to Mo in Florida. Aloha, Mo. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Doing okay.
Good. Can you hold me over if we run into a break?
Well, it all depends. I mean, you've got about 7 minutes.
Oh, good. Good. That's more than I need. I don't want to hog the lines, but I was just thinking. I kind of along with the theme you're talking about tonight. It's really, to me, I just wonder. I know that everybody knows about this left-right paradigm thing. Democrats and Republicans and all this silliness. It just seems ridiculous. And what made me think of this is I know you're aware of this is that. I wonder about how Putin is, if he's really, he's pretty buddy-buddy with Netanyahu. I just wonder if this is all just, theater. I think it is. I don't think anybody, I think Putin, Trump, and Netanyahu, I think they're all on the same mind. It's the same world domination deal, and they got it against everybody, Mm-hmm. Don't you think that's really what's happening?
Yeah, but here's where that world domination game breaks down, because the closer and closer they get to it, you're going to have differing groups saying, well, we should be the ones in charge. And when we talk about globalism and the New World Order, some people are saying, well, it should be the United Nations out of New York. Israel wants it to be Jerusalem. Europe would like it to be Brussels. Who's going to be in charge of the one world government? And that could lead to the collapse of the entire system.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I mean, it seems to me that really when you boil everything down, it gets back to, the Rothschilds, and whatever. That's kind of the apex of the situation, because they've been in power and have influenced. I know you know about World War I, World War II.
Yes.
Both fixes you kind of talked about a little bit. I mean, it's all Rothschild, Zionist, banker crap. I mean, is it not?
Well, I remember a quote from one of the Rothschild's mothers saying that if her sons did not want war, there would be no war. And yeah, wars are used to basically stir things up so that there can be a rich harvest of looted plunder along with plunging nations into debt. And we've seen this pattern before where, a private central bank gets set up. The people are encouraged to borrow until they reach a point where they can't make the payments and they're struggling with the interest. And at that point, the Keynesian economists say the government has to start borrowing on behalf of the people, and pointedly without their permission, to keep the system going, because it's basically a pyramid operation. And then when you reach the point where the people can't borrow anymore and the government can't borrow anymore, which is where we are right now, and that's where the bankers start the wars, because wars suspend the rules and everybody starts borrowing a lot more, plunging themselves into debt to fight the war. And then once the war is all over, more debt, more borrowing to rebuild. And after it's all over, what you've got is more or less what you started out with, but you're now back in the debt slavery of the private central banks for another 100 years.
That's a good gig, huh?
Yeah.
wow, it's so transparent and so out there. They got everybody hating everybody. Well, real quick here, I know I'm running out of time, but what do you think about Russia buying the most amount of gold they bought in the last 10 years?
I think they understand that the paper money system is about to go through a major upset all the way around the globe. And it's not just Russia. China's been buying up a lot of gold. Central banks in general reversed their trend. Prior to 2008, central banks were basically dumping gold. I remember when Great Britain literally sold off all of their gold reserves, saying, oh, no, the paper money is solid. We don't need these brick things. But after 2008 and that meltdown, the policy was reversed, and central banks have been trying to acquire physical gold. And by the way, you should too. And
I'll let you go, Mike. I know you'll let me go, but that was Brown's bottom when Britain dumped his gold, and it really hurt me because I was invested in gold pretty good back then. But thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Have a great show. Bye.
All right. Thanks an awful lot, Mo. Yeah, the way Great Britain sold off their gold actually harmed gold's price. You would have thought they would have wanted to get the maximum value that they could for it, but they didn't. They just dumped it. The price crashed and it was gone here. All right. Getting on back to the economic news here. The official United States Treasury Department debt total just hit $22 trillion about an hour ago. That's where we are, $22 trillion. Let's be honest, they're never going to be able to pay that off. They don't even want to pay it off. Right now, they're just paying the interest payments. Actually, you're paying the interest payments. And out in California, we were talking about how the state has deteriorated, and apparently, over half the people living in California are thinking about leaving. And there is, in fact, a mass migration all across the country from high-tax states to low-tax states. Because people, they're just right on the edge here. Now, the European Union put out a list of 23 countries with deficiencies in their anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing framework. And apparently, 4 U.S. territories, Puerto Rico, American Samoa, Guam, and the United Virgin Islands, were on that list. And the Department of the Treasury is very upset. They're saying, we're not sure. It must be a flawed process. And here's where it gets very interesting, because the Treasury Department issued a statement saying that American banks should ignore this list and not bother to put transactions in these areas under greater scrutiny based on that list. Why is the Treasury Department saying that? Who does it hurt if the bankers, or if these banks do put these transactions under greater scrutiny? So that is a very bizarre statement for the Treasury Department to make. Okay, we're coming up here on yet another commercial break, and we will be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently the Trump administration has announced a sale for all the remaining oil and natural gas lease areas in U.S. government-controlled waters in the Gulf of Mexico. So that's basically it. The reserves are going to be gone. And I'm wondering what they're thinking. Do they need the money? Or are they expecting there to be an oil and gas shortfall if in the event something happens, like the invasion of Venezuela? Now, we're still seeing the repercussions of California's decision to basically shut down, cancel 73% of their planned bullet train. There were supposed to be 3 different lines, one going from Sacramento to San Diego, another one from San Francisco to Los Angeles, and finally the 3rd section, which was going to go from Merced to Bakersfield. And the only one that is still going to be worked on is that Central California line, which is already being called the train to nowhere because hardly anybody wants to go to Bakersfield. I got an email from somebody who lives in Bakersfield, said this is never going to work. There's never going to be enough people on this train to make it pay for itself. We've got the same problem here with our light rail. Because of all the cost overruns and everything, they'll never get enough paying passengers on there to make it into the black. It's permanent government subsidy. Anyway, so Trump is basically saying, well, if they've canceled the project, then the federal government wants the $3.5 billion in federal grant for the high-speed rail returned. And Governor Newsom is out there saying, no, it's California's money now. And we're not going to spend it on what we intended to spend it on, but we'll find something that we're going to spend it on here. So the project is a green disaster, and you need to remember that a big part of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal involves a network of bullet trains, so many of them that airline travel is no longer necessary. Unless, of course, you're coming here to like Hawaii, in which case it's mandatory. But California basically killed almost 3/4 of the bullet train, but they're keeping all the money. Not just the federal funds, but the higher taxes they collected to pay for it all. Now, in the real world, if you set up a business and you attract some customers and you offer to sell them a thing at a certain price and they pay you, and then you come back and you say, I'm sorry, but I can't deliver. I'm going to have to cut it way down, much smaller than you were expecting. Let's say it's a Subway sandwich and it's a foot long, and they come back and say, well, sorry, we can only give you 3 inches of it. It's about right. Well, in the real world, businesses that behave like that go out of business and make way for people with better business sense. Only in government can you cheat the people on such a massive scale and not suffer any consequences for it. And by the way, let us remember that one section of the high-speed rail contract, a near $1 billion one, was won by Dianne Feinstein's husband. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we are talking about the economy. And remember back during the holiday shopping season, oh, it's great, everybody's out there buying, it's going to be a wonderful holiday shopping season. Better rush right on down and buy stuff before the stores run out. And it was total air. It was yet another disastrous holiday shopping season. U.S. retail sales recorded their biggest drop in more than 9 years this last December. There was a sharp slowdown in economic activity at the end of 2018, right in that holiday shopping season. So that's a red flag indicator. Things are not going well out there. The economy is not recovering. We're being mushroomed, kept in the dark, and fed on fertilizer here. All right, getting into immigration and refugees and the rest of that. Trump came on out and he made this claim, saying it would be easier to climb Mount Everest than the new border wall. Well, I hope he's right, but unfortunately we have seen that some of the more enterprising illegal immigrants, they'll bring mattresses to get over the concertina wire. Some of the human smugglers just have these incredibly long ladders that they use. And of course, ultimately, tunnels get dug. So, knowing a little bit about Mount Everest, I think Trump was a little off with that comment. But again, even if you slow down the flow of illegal immigrants by, let us say, 95%, that's going to be a big, big improvement. All right. Now, over in Great Britain, Downing Street is saying that a no-deal Brexit remains an option. Apparently, there's been a lot of claims out there saying that no, Brexit's going to be delayed. There'll be a deal, and that there'll be no hard, no-deal Brexit, and that's going to happen. Well, not really. British parliamentarians basically voted down an amendment calling for a delay in Brexit. So it's now on. It's on its same timeline. And again, it's very contentious. A lot of people are out there. There was an interesting little article. This came out of Sputnik News, and it was written by somebody who is much in favor of Brexit. But the article was saying, no, we will not be leaving the EU. Brexit will never be delivered. Basically saying that somehow or other, this thing is going to be derailed at the last minute. Here's my favorite quote from the entire article. We have a Remain Prime Minister leading a Remain government with a Remain opposition, sending a Remain civil servant to Remain Brussels to discuss Brexit. What could possibly go wrong? But I think if the British government, in fact, finds a way to stop Brexit, you're going to have a lot of very angry British people in the streets. Probably they're already stocking up on their yellow vests. One issue that Britain does need to be dealing with right the heck now is that Britain has so far managed to secure trade deals with 7 of the 69 countries it was previously trading with. Now, I'm going to presume that those are some of the larger countries and that much of the 69 other countries are very, very small. But given that in less than 2 months, Britain is leaving, they've got to get these deals going. And it may be time for a reallocation of negotiators and just get them on out there. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Dan from Illinois. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Hello? Dan? I'm not hearing Dan in Illinois. All right, then we'll put Dan back on hold and go on back to the news about Europe. Guy Verhofstadt has been on the verbal warpath lately, and today he basically called Italy's President Giuseppe Conte a puppet of the populist deputy prime ministers and said the country was suffering from political degeneration. So they're out there hurling all kinds of names and bad words, still trying to find a way to hold the EU together at a time when not just Great Britain, but so many of the other EU member states are really getting tired of Brussels' constant assertion of more authority, its arrogance, the open borders agenda. And most people in Europe are now realizing they got snookered. Because when the European Union deal was proposed to them, it was sold as an open borders, free trade area. And that was going to be it. And now we find out all these years later that the goal all along had been a federal superstate called Europe, in which all these other countries would be relegated to the status of, for example, a Vermont or a Virginia. And the Europeans really don't want that. They're also very upset that they're losing their culture. And that culture was built up for generation after generation after generation after generation of these people. And they don't want to see it just get wiped away. All right, Dan is back. Okay, Dan in Illinois, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me this time?
I hear you now.
Okay. Just real quick, did you hear or see anything about them passing a law in Denver where they say it's okay to urinate, defecate, and camp out in the streets of Denver?
I heard absolutely nothing about that, and recalling Denver as a very clean city, I would be surprised that that law got passed. Let me do a web search here. Where did you see this?
I go through the YouTube videos every morning, and it was on a YouTube video where they were talking about it. I can't remember who. These guys, the ones I look at, aren't just some off-the-wall robo videos and stuff. These are...
Okay.
Might have been on the...
All right, what they actually did, okay, it is still illegal for public urination and defecation. What they did do is they, well, I think it's a bad step. I'm sure that the reason they lowered the penalties is because, they're dealing with a lot of homeless and illegal immigrants who simply don't have the money to pay the fines. But again, my recollection of Denver, I during this phase when I was doing some work on the Strategic Defense Initiative, I spent a lot of time going in and out of Denver. And I remember it as a very clean city. And I'm sorry to hear that it, like San Francisco, like Los Angeles, like so many other cities, is now being turned into a giant outdoor toilet.
Yeah, I used to drive over the road and go in there, and that was a really nice city to, look at and beach driving through and stuff.
They got a fabulous natural history museum.
Yeah. And one more thing, did you hear anything about typhus outbreaks in L.A.?
Yeah, apparently there are so many rats there. The rats have the fleas are carrying typhus. It's even in City Hall. Apparently one of the officials in City Hall has come down with typhus. Now they're having to replace all the carpets because that's where the fleas are hiding out. And again, that's not the Los Angeles I remember when I lived there.
Me neither. Like I said, I drove over the road, and that was not L.A. in the 90s. You had your Skid Row, but it was a booming economy.
Yes.
You could get in, get out, and you look forward to going out there and getting in and out, because of the weather, and you had to deal with the traffic. But it was what I see now. It was nothing like that back in the 90s. It's terrible.
Yeah, it is.
But first typhus, then cholera.
Yeah, they're dealing with that too. I mean, it seems like the entire country is in a state of advanced degeneration or deterioration, if you prefer. But again, all the money, all the wealth that is still here is being spent on the wars and globalism in Israel.
And it's like Detroit. When we would go into Detroit, you could just feel the electricity in the air. It was just so booming.
Yes.
Now it's just a ghost town.
Yep. We're turning into a ghost country. All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Yeah, I think for anybody who is my age, and if you are my age, I feel sorry for you. We remember when America, you could feel proud to be an American. The streets were clean. They were well paved. We had good infrastructure, good trains, spectacular bridges. Looking around at it now, it does feel like we've become a third world country. And whether that was intended by the globalists or whether it is just the natural result of decades of bad choices by the government. But that's the reality. The United States that I grew up in just doesn't exist anymore. And I look around and it just feels like things are getting worse and people are collectively going crazy. We'll be getting into that a little bit later in the talking points. Alrighty, there are more leaks coming on out from the Integrity Initiative. This was this British-funded project. Was supposed to counter Russian propaganda, and it turned out its real purpose was to put out propaganda. And apparently, they sought £5.5 million for an influence campaign in the Balkans. So, yeah, everybody's talking about meddling in each other's elections, but it's only bad if Russia does it. If Britain does it, it's okay. If Israel does it, it's double plus okay. Over in France, the Yellow Vest protesters are denouncing the disproportionate force. They're now into their 3 months now. 1,900 demonstrators have been injured, some of them seriously, some of them have been blinded in one eye, and the protesters are saying the police are using inappropriate force against them. Well, I would imagine that Macron's attitude right now is, slap them down hard, and maybe they'll stop, because the Yellow Vest movement is spreading all over France. It's spreading to other countries as well. It's even here in the United States. And he wants it to go away because the Yellow Vests want him out of office. And it's basically made it very obvious that he's not able to really control his country all that well. Okay. All right. getting on back to this whole situation about quality of life, another article out of Investment Watch blog. Devastated by what Seattle has become, homeless squatter ransacks and ruins woman's apartment and belongings. And yeah, we're seeing that happen too. Well, I can imagine in the winter, it's either break into somebody's home or freeze to death outside. Because I don't know what the homeless shelter situation is in Seattle. And again, Seattle's another city that I've been to, and I remember it as clean and vibrant, horrible inner city traffic. But other than that, it was a nice place to be. And now we're out here, again, homelessness, illegal immigrants, everything. It's all coming apart. Our country is rotting on the vine. And our government is just so obsessed with political infighting and so oblivious to what's going on out here that they're not going to do anything about it. I think it's almost time for Americans to just literally start thinking about maybe being a little more outward focused. Put down your little smartphone, look at the real world, and just make a point. If you're walking along and there's a piece of trash on the ground, just grab it and throw it in the nearest trash bin. If we all start doing that, maybe we can clean up this place because the government is not going to do it. Of course, if you carry that logic a little bit too far, you get into the situation of what are we going to do with the illegal immigrants and the homeless? Now, as far as the homeless is concerned, there's an interesting statistic I heard the other day. And that is that right now, because of the real estate market problems and people not being able to buy homes, living with their parents after they graduate college, there are actually more vacant properties than there are homeless people. And boy, this goes back to a prediction I made some years ago, that we were headed to a country in which the symbol of America was going to be a bunch of homeless people camped out in front of a boarded up mansion. And we seem to have arrived there. Okay, let's get into this. Apparently, there's now an effort to use beer consumption as a red flag with which to confiscate people's guns. And permits for carrying firearms discreetly already come with a ban on possession in places serving alcohol. That's almost anywhere decent you might want to eat. Now, there's no inherent danger in owning sidearms in a restaurant, especially if you don't consume alcohol, but the gun ban tied to the eating ban is virtually complete across the nation. Just more and more, the gun grabbers are going at it, and they're just chipping away bit by bit. And yet, here we continue to see all of these stories of law-abiding citizens defending their homes with legally owned firearms. So apparently, Alvin Smalls, 20-year-old, and Amir Lin, 18, broke into the Titusville home in an apparent robbery attempt last Thursday. I think that it's about a week ago. This is over in Brevard County, and one of them wore a mask, the other was carrying a gun. But a man inside the home had guns of his own and fatally shot both intruders, and good for him. Now, David Hogg is out there again. Apparently, he must be on break from Harvard. And yesterday he came on out with a statement that we don't need armed guards or armed teachers in the schools. We just need to make sure that the ambulance response times are that much better. In other words, David Hogg is saying, yeah, it's okay to be shot. We'll just make sure that you don't die, which is utterly ridiculous. But apparently, during an interview with MSNBC's Andrea Mitchell, David Hogg claimed that those who own AR-15 and other sporting rifles are not interested in self-defense. They're interested in hunting human beings. Now, that was the shark right there. And so Hogg is out there saying that people who have those kinds of weapons, the sporting rifles, want to hunt other people. That is just completely, absolutely absurd. And apparently his latest thing is to get a ballot initiative to ban all sporting rifles in Florida. Now, what they mean by a sporting rifle is anything with a rail on it for accessories. They even passed some new gun laws here in Hawaii where now if you've got that foregrip on your weapon, that now makes it an assault weapon and illegal. And it's like, after having all these accessories, having a gun that can take all these accessories, they're trying to knock them off one by one. Can't have the foregrip. Now they're talking about banning laser sights. Along with the porn license. That's another new one we have here in Hawaii. If this law is implemented, there are going to be porn blocks on your internet account, which will be released when you document that you are over 18 years of age and you pay a licensing fee. The state now wants to get a piece of the action of the porn industry. Getting on back to the guns here, David Hogg needs to be reminded you are over 20 times more likely to be killed by the medical system than by guns. Last year in 2018, there were more than 1,700 red flag orders. And the red flag laws allow for temporary seizure of firearms from those deemed a threat to themselves or others. Some of the people whose guns are seized are saying it's not all that temporary, and they have to go to court to get their weapons back. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And, you know, I remember when this happened. We're talking about the city of Anaheim, California. And a while back, there was this guy who was literally gunned down by 5 Anaheim police officers. Cesar Ray Cruz, 35 years old, was shot to death. 4 of the officers said they fired because they saw Cruz reach for his waistband, believed he was going for a gun. A tipster, they say, had told police Cruz was carrying a gun, but he did not have one on him. So all these years later, and Teresa Smith, his mother, is trying to unseal all the records. And because of a recent change in the law, there's a Public Records Act that allows her to get these files. Senate Bill 1421, which took effect on the 1st of January. And the types of files are limited, but they include if an officer was found by superiors to have lied or had an inappropriate sexual relationship on the job, or if officers used force where a person was killed or suffered great bodily harm. Well, in many jurisdictions in California, including Southern California, they want to block the release of these files, arguing that anything created before that date should be kept private. Others, such as Anaheim, are trying to comply with the new law, but they are definitely putting up roadblocks because Anaheim is saying that Teresa can have all the records if she puts $3,000 on the counter, because they don't feel the taxpayers should be forced to pay for it. I don't think so. I think Anaheim Police Department wants this story to go away. They don't want it to show up in the media yet again. But it was a horrible thing. Okay, do you remember Gordon Ramsay? He is a celebrity chef, and he's the latest victim of the social justice warrior mob, because he announced recently, and again, he's a chef. He's known all over the world, and he's very good. He's had TV shows. So he announced his plans to open an authentic Asian restaurant in England, and the social justice warriors went completely nutso. You can't do that. You're not Asian. It's cultural appropriation. Well, first of all, I think it's utterly ridiculous to say that you must be Italian to open a pizza parlor, or you must be Mexican to open a taco stand. It gets in the way of commerce. Second of all, Gordon Ramsay himself is not going to be doing the cooking. He's going to have a staff in there who might actually turn out to be Asian. But it's just one more thing for the snowflakes to whine about. Now, here's another good one. Over in Arkansas, you're going to love this one here. There was this Boy Scout troop, Troop 19, that has been basically sworn in as a Boy Scout troop in Arkansas. It is unique in that every single member of Troop 19 is female. It's an all-female Boy Scout troop. That's how completely, utterly ridiculous this whole situation is getting. Down in Florida, there's a family who's raising a gender-neutral baby, and they're absolutely insistent that the genitals on the child are completely irrelevant regarding the gender. And the parents are saying that they're going to raise the child gender neutral, and then when they get older, the child will be able to pick the gender they want to be. This is seriously going to mess this kid up. Absolutely. Meanwhile, over in Tennessee, the LGBTQ advocates are just screaming over a Tennessee bill that would prohibit indecently exposing yourself in a locker room designated for the opposite sex. Now, there is something quite revealing. So Tennessee passed a bill that prohibits indecently exposing yourself in a locker room designated for the opposite sex. In other words, keep the towel on. And the LGBTQ advocates, they don't like that at all here. And yet another very bizarre one. This is over in Great Britain. There is this transgender man who was able to access a sperm donor just 10 days after legally completing his gender transition to being a man. But he was biologically born a woman and apparently still had a womb because he got pregnant. She got pregnant. It became pregnant. And he's going to the high court demanding to be registered as the father on the child's birth certificate. And so Sir Andrew McFarlane, the president of the Family Division of the High Court, is basically saying it's time to review the fertility laws. Anyway, the world is going crazy. People are going crazy. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Robert in London. Aloha, Robert. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Hi. Yes, a quick comment. You talked about the chef, the English chef, who wanted to open an Asian restaurant. And
yes.
And everyone was complaining. Apparently, he doesn't know what to do or whatever it is. I challenge you, in my area of England, in East London, I challenge you. Fish and chip shops is a very English food.
Yes.
And I used to, when I was working in a hotel, American tourists would come in and say, hey, take me to the nearest fish and chip shop. And we'd have to scratch our head because where are the fish and chip shops? Oh, well, there is one about 5 miles away or something. Since then, they've all come back because English people want to have fish and chips, even though it's bad for you. But you go into any fish and chip shop in my area, which there are plenty now, and you walk in and the TV's on, and can you understand the TV? No, you can't, because it's in Turkish. So which English food, fish and chip shop is not run by a Turkish family? That's my point. So as far as culture goes, it all gets swapped round, whatever works. You know,
well,
you know,
it was just another chance for the liberal snowflakes to scream about a bad white guy, because obviously they're not in there screaming at the Turks for cultural appropriation for the fish and chips.
Absolutely. Yeah, there you go, eh? So that's my comment.
Okay.
Yeah. Where can you find English people running an English fish and chip shop?
Good question. Anyway, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. All right. And again, getting back into la-la land of political correctness and so forth and so on. Over in Great Britain, there's a group called the Leicestershire Animal Save. They are hosting these roadside vigils in Melton Mowbray, where they're performing what they describe as last rites for incoming cows headed to an abattoir, which is where the cows get put down and sliced up to get ready to the supermarket. And apparently the owners of the abattoir are perfectly okay with that. And so they'll come up and they'll say, I love you and we're sorry to the cows. And they've apparently been doing this since 2015. That is a little bit out there, I think. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I like cows too. I was raised on a farm. But we understood the reason we're raising this animal is it's come harvest time, it's going to be hamburger. Out in Arizona, Democrats want to get rid of the In God We Trust specialty license plates, claiming that they fund a hate group. Because proceeds from this specialty plate, which costs more than the standard Arizona license plate, goes to the Scottsdale-based Alliance Defending Freedom group, which the Southern Poverty Law Center designated as a hate group because it will not support same-sex marriages. So ADF's mission is to keep the doors open for the gospel by advocating for religious liberty, the sanctity of life, and marriage and family. State Senator Juan Mendez proposed legislation that would prevent the state's Department of Transportation from selling the plates. Okay. Over at Yale University, yet again, apparently there's an op-ed in the Yale Daily newspaper, written by a student who attends Yale University's Jonathan Edwards College. And she wrote this op-ed calling on all Yale students to spy on straight white males in order to collect any evidence that might be usable to destroy their careers later on in life. There is a serious, serious problem in this country. I mean, straight white males are under attack from all sides. The lesbians hate the straight white males. The gay men hate the straight white males. Black people hate the straight white males. Hispanics hate the straight white males. It'd be easy to get yourself into kind of a pillbox mentality with all of this that's going on here. Terry Crews, who may be making big moves as the newest host of America's Got Talent, came on out and said toxic masculinity is a cult and men need deprogramming. So now they want to brainwash men into being whatever the liberals think they ought to be. It's amazing. And you've been hearing all this stuff about, you know, white privilege and all the rest of it. They've got a new one out there. There's this blogger named California Girl, G-U-R-L, basically saying that you need to check your thin privilege. That's the new one. First it was white privilege. Now it's if you're thin, you have a certain privilege, because everyday tasks that a thinner person can take for granted can leave a plus-size person like myself feeling full of anxiety, burden, and upset. Okay, well, California, I have a suggestion for you. Don't be a plus-size person anymore. Because if I can do it, you can do it. I took off more than 100 pounds. It took 2 years to do it, and now I'm a skinny mini. So if you're a plus-size person, it's because of choices you're making in your life. And stop trying to guilt those of us who are living a healthier lifestyle into thinking that we owe you something, because we don't. Now, over at the FDA, there is unfortunately a growing tendency for the FDA to start declaring supplements, which are already for sale in health food stores, as medications, and then to assign control of that medication to a large pharmaceutical corporation. So now the FDA is saying that CBD oil is a drug, not a supplement. And it is estimated that when it is being sold as a drug through the pharmacies under a doctor's prescription, it will cost $32,500 a year. So basically, the FDA is being used to create monopolies on what used to be public domain products. It's completely corrupt. It's completely corrupt. Things that we grow in our garden, we're not going to be allowed to grow them anymore. All right, we're tracking Winter Storm Nadia, and it is spreading snow through parts of the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic going to this weekend after hammering the West with heavy snow in the last few days. And we were reporting yesterday about something like 250 cars were stranded at the Snoqualmie Pass in Washington State because of avalanches on both sides. And again, it's an area of Washington State Claire and I spent a great deal of time in, mostly summer, but we went up there during the winter. There's a ski resort up there. But it's still out there. The storm is still out there. And by the way, we're getting cold records out here in Hawaii. Now you're going to like this one. This is over in Colorado. And there is this woman, Linda Woolley. And she died, unfortunately, just a week ago. 9 months after doctors wrongly removed both of her healthy kidneys by mistake. And what happened was that they had done a misdiagnosis, claiming there was cancer in both of her kidneys, and they had to remove them, which meant that she had to undergo 4-hour dialysis treatments 3 times a week. And she passed away on Friday. Now, the hospital's out there saying, well, because of privacy laws, we really can't discuss this matter. The patient is dead. And I imagine that her family is probably going to be hunting down for a good, vicious lawyer right about now. As you know, there has been a growing realization that the measles vaccine actually seems to cause a lot more measles than it prevents. And we had these stories yesterday about these new polls coming on out where parents are not absolutely convinced vaccines are good for their children. Half of parents think the vaccines could make their children sick. A third of parents think the vaccines don't even work. And apparently, the spin now is this is all the fault of Russia, that Russian trolls are all over the internet with these phony stories about the dangers of vaccines because they want Americans to get sick and die. That's the latest spin. It's all Russia's fault. If you're seeing something critical of vaccines, oh, it's Russian propaganda. And if you repeat it or forward it or post it, then you must be a Russian agent. Getting on back to the FDA, this one you're really going to like. All right. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., on behalf of the Informed Consent Action Network, a vaccine safety advocacy group, sought all the clinical trial data used by the FDA to approve influenza vaccines for pregnant women. Makes perfect sense. There's a problem. The FDI's reply was, we have no records responsive to your requests. Let me translate that out of government speak. In other words, the FDI has 0 clinical trial data regarding influenza vaccines for pregnant women which have been approved. In other words, the FDA is admitting the government is recommending untested, unlicensed vaccines for pregnant women. Now, the manufacturers of flu and Tdap vaccines warn against their use for pregnant mothers since their safety has not been established. They're even admitting, we don't know what's going to happen. But here, we're selling it anyway. Over in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Ebola epidemic is continuing to grow. They can't get a handle on it. And apparently there's some serious exploitation there. Congolese women are being offered the new experimental Ebola vaccine in exchange for sex, which is tacky, but the relief efforts are being compromised. The problem, though, is, as we reported yesterday, there are some people who are getting this experimental Ebola vaccine and immediately coming down with Ebola. It's that old problem with attenuated pathogen vaccines where the pathogen reverts to full potency. In the case of Ebola, it's a single-strand RNA that is at the heart of it, and it's constantly mutating and changing and reforming. So to me, it seems rather folly to think that you can sort of put it into a configuration where it's going to be weaker and not have it simply mutate back into something stronger. Now, of course, in the long run, Ebola doesn't want to mutate to kill more people. It wants to mutate to where it is undetectable, because that's what makes it more successful. When measles first showed up, it was almost a slate wiper, and today it's a childhood annoyance. Okay, another article, this one out of Government Slaves here. Shocking new data survey shows a growing number of parents are waking up to the flu industry's lies, at least when it comes to the flu shot. And while vaccine skepticism is largely maligned by the corporate media, who depend on those big buck advertisements from the pharmaceutical industry, the truth is a substantial number of professionals are turning their backs on big pharma. Anti-vax nurses are coming out of the woodwork to tell their stories, and a lot of top scientists and doctors are now refusing to vaccinate their own children. So it's time to realize big pharma and the government elite do not have your best interests in mind. You're just another means to make money for corporations who will then pay more taxes and make more donations to politicians here. Yesterday, we mentioned that Donald Trump had signed an executive order calling on U.S. agencies to basically accelerate development of artificial intelligence. He's operating from the belief that right now the United States is the world leader in artificial intelligence. I'm not entirely sure about that. I think Japan is. But Trump wants us to basically go along with that. And the Pentagon has now unveiled a 17-page strategy on artificial intelligence and says machines will impact every corner of the military as it ramps up efforts in the AI arms race with Russia and China. And it sounds really wonderful. Actually, it reminds me a lot of James Cameron's Terminator movies. And the reason I'm concerned is very simple, and that is looking at what has happened to our financial systems as they became computerized, where they're programmed to seek more wealth, oblivious to any other aspect. And I think they're actually causing a lot more harm to the general population by this behavior. Well, what are these military AI systems going to be programmed to do? Seek out the enemy and kill them. And we could get into a situation where these machines are battling each other, and like the Terminator movies, we're just scurrying underground to stay out of their way. It could be completely possible, especially with the quality of programming that comes out of the Pentagon. Apparently, Pope Francis received Microsoft's President Brad Smith in Vatican City to discuss the prospects of artificial intelligence technologies. I didn't realize the Pope was really conversant with that. But apparently Smith emphasized that AI should be used for the well-being of society, hear, hear. And Microsoft's chief spoke about some ways to overcome a global gap in the development of digital technologies. There is no truth to the rumor that they're getting ready to release the iPope. NASA is getting ready to launch a new space telescope. It's going to be launched in 2023. It's called the Spectrophotometer for the History of the Universe, Epic of Reionization and Ice's Explorer. It's nicknamed Sphere X, and the instrument is designed to address two key questions: how the universe evolved and how common some crucial building blocks of life are across our galaxy. By the way, do you remember that asteroid series? And as the spacecraft got closer and closer, there were these mysterious white spots, and everybody's saying, what are they? What are they? Turns out they're salt deposits, because Ceres actually had internal water, brackish water, that was geysering out, and it left behind the salt. So, okay, we got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And over on YouTube, there is this gentleman, Shane Dawson. He's got 20 million subscribers on his channel. And he bills himself as a conspiracy theorist, but his latest one has attracted a lot of attention. Basically, he went into a Chuck E. Cheese's store, pizzeria, party place, and ordered a pizza. And when it got there, he noticed the pieces didn't quite seem to fit together. In other words, it didn't look like one pizza that had been sliced up. And he and his friends basically shuffled it around and came to the conclusion they were looking at different slices of pizza that had come from different pieces. And that in turn led to his conclusion that Chuck E. Cheese's is actually recycling uneaten slices of pizza. When the trays come back from the tables, if there are uneaten slices there, they grab them and they use them to put together new pizzas. I can imagine it could be seen as a cost-saving situation, but of course, Chuck E. Cheese is now denying that they would do this. But the video's actually very convincing. Not that I go into Chuck E. Cheese's. I haven't been in one. I don't remember the last time I went into a Chuck E. Cheese. It's not my kind of place here. But he makes a convincing presentation. And so we'll see what's going to happen. And if Chuck E. Cheese demands that YouTube shut this guy down because he's interfering with corporate profits. But, yeah. And he said they never line up. There's no way that those slices can be made to form a single original pizza fresh from the oven. If you are driving an F-150 Ford pickup in North America, Ford has just recalled 1.48 million of them over the transmissions. Apparently, there's a potential transmission downshift issue that could increase the risk of a crash. Pardon me. Ford said select 2011 to 2013 model year trucks with 6-speed automatic transmissions could experience an unintended downshift into first gear without warning, which could result in the loss of vehicle control. Yeah, it could. And apparently Ford is aware of 5 accidents, including one report of whiplash, potentially related to the issue. So the recall covers 1.26 million trucks in the United States and 221,000 in Canada. Dealers will update the powertrain control software, and the company will notify customers next month. So apparently it's not in the physical transmission itself, it's in the transmission software. All right. Over in Chicago, demand for gun permits is surging. People want to be able to protect their homes here. And let's see, there's a new flaw that lets hackers remotely accelerate or hit the brakes on popular electric scooters. And I'm wondering why scooters would even have some kind of a radio link. But apparently it is a problem. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here and on the website, share it with everybody that you know. Use email, face-to-face, bring back the art of the conversation. And please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.